Welcome to the Karuna Life, the podcast where we explore the connection between spirituality and everyday life. I'm Gina Kitzmiller. I'm a professional intuitive, a Reiki master teacher, and a longtime spiritual seeker. Join me as we dive into topics like living a heart-centered life, connecting with our intuition, and unleashing our own power. We'll discuss the metaphysical world, spirit guides, and finding magic in the ordinary. Get ready to embrace your inner mystic and explore the realms of the unseen. Welcome to the Karuna Life. I'm Gina Kitzmiller. Today we are going to talk about holidays and grief. So I wanted to share my experience about getting through the holidays with grief. I also want to talk about parenting younger children through the holidays with grief because there isn't really a lot out there. And of course, I will ask my spirit guides if they have anything that they would like to contribute to today's episode. So let's get started. Grief around the holidays is such a complex topic that I wasn't sure where I even wanted to begin. But I thought I would begin by sharing one of the harder memories that I have. For those of you who don't know, my husband and I were separated when he passed away by suicide in 2018. It was the fall. And so the holidays were quickly upon us after, kind of those busy weeks when you're planning calling hours and the funeral. And then things get kind of quiet. And then before I knew it, we were coming right into the holiday season, which was an extremely difficult time. So I wasn't really sure what to expect with this being the first holidays, if it's now been 6 years. But that first year, I remember that we kind of did our normal routine. We went to my parents' house, and the kids seemed to really like the distraction of kind of keeping things normal. They liked seeing their cousins and the family members. I remember that I over decorated the house that year just because I was trying to overcompensate and I wanted to just create a really safe space for them. I wanted them to have the best holiday that they possibly could, even though I knew we were all grieving. So that Christmas Eve, my kids went to bed, and I have a holiday tradition where I watch the family stone. I wrap Christmas presents and put them out underneath the tree. And normally Joe would be doing that with me. So that year felt different, right? Because I was by myself for the first time. I was feeling really very alone. So I watched the movie, although it just felt really flat to me. And I really was holding on to this hope that I was going to get a sign from Joe. I wanted something to happen in the physical. And that wasn't completely out of character because I would have gotten some signs from him previously that were very physical in nature. He had knocked over lamps, like pictures would fall off of walls, lights would flash. So I thought for sure this is Christmas Eve. He's going to come forward and he's going to leave me this really big sign that he is with me, right? Because this was important to me, right? This felt very significant being the first holiday without him. So I sat on the couch and I waited, and the movie finished, and the credits started rolling, and nothing happened. And I thought, gosh, maybe he needs a little bit more time. And I had started to get up to go to bed, and I thought, no, I'm just going to give him a few more minutes. I don't know why. I thought maybe he needed more time. And so I sat back down, feeling extremely alone in that moment, just looking at the Christmas tree. I know I had tears going down my face and just feeling just about as low as I think anyone could feel. And I thought for sure I was going to get something, right? And nothing did. And I eventually turned the TV off and went to bed feeling really, really alone. And I wanted to start with that because I was like, that really is to me grief, right? It's that feeling that we feel separate, we feel alone, we feel like our loved ones aren't with us. And it was one of the hardest emotions I think I've felt in grief was that night. Now we went on to have Christmas. It was difficult, but we got through it. I think the kids got through it probably better than I did. And it was a real big learning experience. And I was pretty bitter about not getting a sign. And I complained to my spirit guides about it and just said, I didn't understand. I was feeling so alone in that moment. I remember asking, how could he not be with me? And they said, well, he was with you. Was he just not with you in the way that you expected him to be? Now, I admit I had expectations, right? I wanted something physical to happen. I wanted the lights to flash. I wanted almost to even see him sitting on the couch. If you really ask what I would have liked something that really would have let me know in the physical that he was with me. And I didn't get any of that. And they said that that was why. They said, "You didn't really need him in that moment, Gina." And I thought, well, like, they're right. Like, I knew I had wrapped the presents, I had done what I needed to do for the kids, but I still really wanted that connection. And I have to be honest, I wasn't really happy with their answer. And I'm still not real happy with their answer, even sitting here years later. But that is really the difficult thing with grief. So I wanted to talk about, parenting children with grief, some things that I did that I wish I had done a little bit differently, and things that I felt were really helpful to them. So let's start with the good stuff, right? So shortly after Joe had died, I remember that I had coincidentally bought my sister a book the prior Christmas. And I read the book before I gave it to her. And I don't remember the title, but it was all about a woman who had lost her husband unexpectedly. And she didn't want to celebrate the Christmas season. So her daughter was like asking her to do stuff, and she just didn't have it in her. And she started to receive these presents on their front porch unexpectedly by a mysterious person that I don't know that they ever named. And her daughter would get really excited when she would find these presents on the porch. It would be like maybe cookie ingredients or something that they could do together for the holiday season. And she talks about how that experience of receiving those gifts leading up to Christmas helped her to re-engage with her daughter, which is what it feels like the daughter probably needed at that time, and helped her to kind of walk through that holiday season. And I had mentioned it to my good group of girlfriends shortly after Joe died that I was already starting to worry about the holidays. And I thought, gosh, it would be really great if someone could do something like that. And I don't know that I even mentioned it again, but sure enough, I think about 10 days before Christmas, we arrived home from something and there's a basket on my front porch with gifts for the kids. And I think occasionally there were even gifts for me in the basket. And my kids loved it. It became this game for them. So they were in second and fourth grade at the time, and they nicknamed this mysterious gift giver the ninja elf. And I remember them sprinting to the dark windows and saying, "Do you see the ninja elf?" And my son would be upstairs and my daughter would be on the downstairs window. And she'd be like, "No, I don't see them yet. Do you see them?" And it became this game for them every day to see if they could catch the ninja elf. And they never did. And to me, surprisingly, they never put together who it might be. And really became this wonderful way to give them something else to focus on during that holiday season. And it was really one of the more special moments of that holiday that I still take and hold with me from that time. So with children, they obviously grieve very differently, right? A lot of times they're not really outward with their grief. And that can be really hard as a parent because we want to kind of encourage them to grieve, but it looks so different that for my children, they really went back into their regular routines. It doesn't mean they weren't missing their dad because I know they were and still do. But for them, it was kind of a way of putting that compartment that they could then turn their focus to something different, and then touch into their grief kind of when they needed to in their own way. So, some of the things that we did after Joe's death that I thought was helpful was we created a memory jar where we would write down memories of him. We shared stories, and we still do share stories about him all the time. And I would ask them kind of usually, what do they need? Is there something that they need? And that's really kind of developed into some unusual kind of, I would say, traditions or rituals. And the example I would give that for my children, when we go to the cemetery, we go a couple times a year, but we always get Taco Bell, which I am not a fan of Taco Bell, but Joe liked Taco Bell. And that's a way that they connect in with him. And so we go and get Taco Bell and we take it to the cemetery, and it's kind of lightened that experience for them so that they look forward to it and it doesn't feel quite as heavy as it could otherwise. Now, the one thing I did do that I would not recommend that I learned kind of, I would say, the hard way is that when someone dies, we often want to, at least for me, I want to do something immediately to honor them, to show them that I'm carrying on their memory. And so when Joe passed away, it must have been, gosh, like 6 weeks after he had passed. And there's a really wonderful organization here in Columbus, Ohio, that specifically deals with loss by suicide. And it's a wonderful group. And they were offering this candlelight memorial to show our loved ones in spirit that we would be carrying them into the holiday season. And I thought that was a really beautiful idea. So I took my children, again, second and fourth grade, and we went to this church. And as soon as we walked in, I immediately felt a hesitancy because the church was very dimly lit. There was a piano player playing this very sentimental music, and you could feel the heaviness of grief in that room. And in hindsight, I should have just took the kids and left. But I thought, oh my gosh, they're going to show Joe's picture. I can't just leave. Like we said, we were going to be here. So I took the kids and we went and sat in one of the church pews. And what followed was a very beautiful, but a very, very heavy and sad memorial. And at one point, we got up and we walked to the front to light a candle. They showed Joe's picture with the date of birth and the date of death, which was really hard to see that soon after his passing. And we left, and I just knew it was not the right thing to do. It wasn't the right thing for me. It wasn't the right thing for my kids. We got into the car, and everybody was really quiet. And I just had to say, like, I'm really sorry, guys. I kind of messed up. Like, I thought this was going to be different. I thought it was going to be a little bit lighter. And instead it was just really sad. And do you guys need anything? And of course, my daughter chimed in almost immediately that she wanted a Wendy's Frosty, that that was going to make her feel better. So we went and got Wendy's to kind of lighten the mood, went home, and I think we watched something a little more lighthearted on TV. And the only thing they ever said after that was, please don't ever make us go to that again. And I assured them that I would not. Now, for some people, that event might have been exactly what they needed. It wasn't what me and my children needed in that moment. We weren't ready to go into the deep end, so to speak. So I would say take some time to make sure that you feel able to do the event and to give yourself permission to leave if you get there and you suddenly feel like I did of this isn't the right place for me to be. It's okay to honor that and to leave. The other thing that my kids did for the first couple months, so after Joe passed, they actually slept in my room with me, which was really comforting for all of us. And it was really sweet that every night before we would go to bed, we would tell Joe good night. And the kids would just say, good night, Dad. We love you. And I would tell him good night. And it was a way to make us really feel like he was still with us. The other thing we did is as a family, we had game night and we would always play sorry. And after Joe died, we continued that tradition. And I would have the kids play his part and they would move his players around the board and knock each other out. And it was a really good way for them to still feel connected to him. In that moment for us, playing his turn felt really comforting. And it was something that we really did for quite a few months until eventually, as they got older, they would do it less and less, but they still remember the games of sorry. And I think it really did help us in the grief process. So I wish I had some big suggestions for all of you who are grieving. And yet I think that grief is so unique and individual to each of us that I would say to, hold steady as best as you can. We have to allow grief to present the way that it needs to present for us. And that's going to look different. And to honor those that you're supporting who are in grief, if their grief looks different than what you expect it to, or it's not following a timeline that you would expect it to be kind and compassionate and to know there is no timeline in grief. There is no right or wrong way to grieve. My guides told me that once. They said that if I picked my head up and I found the divine in grief, that was wonderful. And they applauded that. And they said, if you choose to lie in a corner in the fetal position, we would cheer and applaud that as well. So we do need to kind of let go of some of the society pressures I think that we have around grief and how that needs to look. For some of you, it might be important to continue certain holiday traditions. And for others of you, you might want to choose to do something different. You might choose to shift the traditions a little bit if that's what feels right for you. So I'm asking my guides if there's anything that they would like to offer. So they're telling me to remind all of you, if there's so many people grieving right now in the world, that a lot of times that we can look at kind of the narrative around grief and what's causing us more pain. And for me, that was often the belief of he's not with me anymore. He's gone. I'm never going to talk to him again. He's separate from me. Those are all things that really bring up those overwhelming feelings of grief. And yet I've learned over the years that he is still very much with me. He actually doesn't feel separate from me, as he has told me in spirit. He says, I don't feel separate from you. I feel like I'm right there with you. And I still see life. I just see it through your eyes and I see it through the eyes of the kids. So for him, he feels like he's still very much a part of it. It's our human part, right? That wants something physical. We want something tangible when we are in grief. So the guides are saying to look for signs, but not to get too hung up on signs, because sometimes we can do that where we want to demand or issue a sign that has to be seen. And there's a real anger, I feel like, underneath sometimes when we want to make that demand. And that it's important to just open and allow the grief they're saying to kind of come up and out of the heart chakra. There's a lot that has been triggered, they're saying recently. So it's sometimes it's not only about a certain event or the loss of someone that can trigger grief that maybe you even experienced years ago. It could be something that's unrelated to the loss of someone, but maybe there's something that you're grieving, like the loss of a marriage. And that grief is now bubbling up with this most recent loss. So they're saying take time to honor it. And if something comes up that you're not sure, to sit with it and to ask those questions, explore the emotions a little bit. That's kind of what we're here to do. They're saying don't get too caught up in the stories, but to allow the emotions to come up and move out of the field is really, they're saying, what they would call kind of best practice. To make it a little bit more comfortable. They're saying it's not right or wrong. They want to be clear about that, but they're trying to give us ways that they can make the grief process really they're saying as comfortably uncomfortable. I don't know if that's a right word, but that's what I'm getting. As comfortably uncomfortable as it can be. It is really important, they are saying, to make sure that you honor the time alone that you need. And then for some of you, it is really learning to reach out and ask for help, to lean into the community that's there. There's a lot of you who I would say are a little bit like me, where we don't accept help real easily. And we have a very automatic reply when someone says, do you need anything? What do we say? Nope, I'm fine. But when we can soften and when we can allow others to help, it really does open the heart. It's really a gift, not just for you, but for them in being able to offer. So please don't, if you are supporting someone who is grieving, don't be afraid to ask and say, hey, I would like to do this. Is that okay? Or can I get your thoughts on this? It does help to be specific with those who are grieving, because sometimes we do a blanket statement of, do you need anything? And it's just so kind of general that it's sometimes hard for those of us who are a little more introverted to say, yes, actually, I need you to go to the post office and get me some stamps, right? Or do you think you could pick this up at the grocery store for me? So it can be helpful if you can try to be as specific as possible with what you're able or would like to do. I remember when Joe passed away, one of the really beautiful things people did was that there was a meal train and people brought us food a couple days a week. And they did this for months. It was amazing. And my kids loved it. It just really helped me during the grieving process because I didn't have the energy to be making dinner every night. And it allowed us to still be able to sit down together as a family. And there were people that bought us gift cards to the grocery store. And that was a real help to us during that time. And every time I would use a gift card that someone gave me, it was always that reminder that someone out there cared about me and was supporting me in that moment. And so even if they weren't with me to say, get that cup of coffee or to pick up that grocery, it was still a really beautiful way that always made me feel supported on those days that I was really struggling and feeling very alone. So I hope that this helps. I'm hoping to do one more podcast in December. For some of you may know, I am packing up my condo to move right before Christmas. So it is a little bit busy, but there is one other podcast that is in my heart to get done. So, and it is going to be called Coffee with Ghost. So hopefully that will be out here in the next week or so. But until then, I hope you are having a very peaceful holiday season. And just know that for those of you who are grieving, my heart is absolutely with you. Have a good rest of your week.